Hi, Book 2. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and I want to do a discussion or a chatty video where I talk about why I love a certain author, and as you saw from hopefully the thumbnail, I'm still kind of trying to figure out how that all works. I want to talk about Stephen King and why I love him as a writer and why I will buy his books. Now, I can't claim he's an auto-author because there are some of his books that I'm not interested in the plot. I mean, never say never. But, as I've said this before, I have no interest in the Mr. Mercedes series. Or from Buick 8, I don't know. Although, listening to the audiobook of On Writing, where he talks about some of these books, from Buick 8, and then it kind of made me a tiny bit more interested. And then I don't know about. Okay, for some reason I keep getting these messages from Google. They're like, type in your password is required. And I don't know what that is. I kept trying to do it. I did it when I first saw it. And it keeps popping up. I keep hitting closed, but it pops up every day. It's like, I'm hitting closed. That means I'm not interested. I don't know what to do. It just keeps coming, and that's not the only one. There's another thing that keeps popping up, and I keep hitting closed and ignore it, and it just keeps going. It keeps popping up, and it won't go away. It's like, do you have to do everything like that when it says it's required to put your password? I have had no trouble. I mean, I guess because it says required, it must be required. But I have had no trouble with my Gmail account. I don't need an update. I'm fine. But I have not had any, knock on wood, any virus problems or anything like that. I think they just the other thing that pops up is the whole Avast. Oh, you have people can see your information and you're not protected. So, and then of course conveniently you have to pay for it. To download something. No, I'm not doing that. I am not wasting my money on that when nothing has happened. Again, knock on wood. Okay, back on topic. So, Christine is another one that I debate about. I don't know if I'm interested or not. If it's a novella or if it's a short novel, then maybe I'll get it if I can see it for a cheap paperback, like a mass market paperback at Givens, when we can go back to go into stores and stuff, and this whole mess is gone. Hopefully, it will be. Then maybe if I see it there, I'll get it. But right now, I have no interest. So I can't claim he's an auto-author, but I have a lot, and my collection has grown these past couple years, and then I also have a bunch of DVDs of his work as well, because he's also he screenwrites, and which I think is amazing that he can do that. It looks easy. I feel like screenwriting is one of those things that looks easy, but I guarantee you it's not. Well, I can't guarantee you because I don't have an experience with it, but it doesn't. I imagine it's not easy. I mean, I imagine maybe it's a little bit easier than writing a whole novel because you're just writing bits of dialogue and maybe describing the action, just like with a comic book, where, it might be harder than it looks. Now, what I love about King is first of all, I love his writing style. He is very honest, very straightforward, and very blunt, and he will tell you from the person's bathroom routine all the way to their dirty little thoughts, like their pervy little thoughts or their evil and wicked little thoughts. And I know for some people they don't like it. I mean, Stephen King's not for everybody, but I personally like it because it really helps you get to know his characters. And they're real people. I mean, you can deny it all you want, and lie to yourself all you want, but we all have those nasty, dirty little thoughts. I mean, and we all have, we all have prejudices, and society has brainwashed all of us at one time or another to think a certain way about a certain group of people for stupid reasons. And we all do dirty things. Like, we all, like, okay, this problem, maybe this might get a little laugh. The good news I can't hear is that we all fart. We all pick our noses when no one's looking. We all, we all make funny faces when we're trying to go poop. We all have disgusting little things we do. And he talks about that because it helps you get to know the characters. They feel real. Yes, there are a lot of good authors that will, show characters' emotions and all that stuff that you can relate to on some level. But he works on the more simpler things that everybody can relate to. Because not everybody has lost someone to death, or at least not yet. They will at some point because everybody dies. No one's immortal. And we all, and not all of us had like a broken, have a disability or like have a physical or mental disability. Not everybody has been through a war, and not everybody has magical powers that they can't handle. But everybody, like I said, has like dirty little thoughts and can have hateful thoughts. And everybody has disgusting habits. And that's what he looks at. He really looks at that kind of stuff and really talks about it. And it helps you get to know the character. You really get to know them and understand. And you know them on a basic level. And you also, with hearing their thoughts and the way their thoughts and stuff, you get to know them on a little bit beyond a basic level. Because how a person thinks kind of reflects a part of who they are. He also is very, he has a straightforward, I love, I like flowery writing. But not to the point where it feels like you're reading poetry and it's, I like I still like a straightforward writing style, and he's very straightforward. He doesn't, but he also, when I was listening listening to the audiobook on his nonfiction work on writing, he does say that he does love metaphor, but he likes metaphors that are not cliche, and of course they make sense. They're not just random metaphors that someone's trying to be creative and describing something. It's like, what was that? How does that relate to this thing? So he does include that stuff, but it's also it's not over the top, and it's just very straightforward to the point, and to the point, getting what his goal of what he's trying to say in the sentence or what he's trying to describe, without it being like I said, without coming off as sounding like poetry that you just can't understand, or they can have so many different interpretations. Which is coming from a girl who loves English and literature and likes the whole idea of that you can have so many different opinions, interpretations of something. And I love analyzing things like stories and stuff like that. Not everything, but fiction. I love, analyzing, trying to understand a person. And that's one of the reasons why one of the many reasons I don't like math is because it's just, you have to, if you make one mistake and don't get, and it's not, or if you don't get the answer is, if you make one mistake, the answer is wrong, it's wrong. And you have to do it all over again. I mean, which, I like piecing things together, but I don't like it when I didn't like the struggle of, if I made one mistake, then it made the whole thing messed up the whole thing, and I have to start over. While with literature, you can interpret it however you want, and it's not like there's a wrong answer to interpretation of a work of fiction. And let's see, okay. So what else I like about King is that he's also, not only is he straightforward, not only is he, but I like his crassness. I know it's not for everybody. I personally don't like I don't say a lot of curse words. I especially don't like using the F word for people with, but, he uses it in his books. Yes, he uses those words, uses foul language and uses things that come off as sounding racist and bigot and stuff like that, but unfortunately, that still exists in the world, and a lot of his books are about the real world and the world he knows. It's in he grew up in the middle class of the 1960s and 70s, and that stuff existed, unfortunately. So his work is very real and very gritty, and, yes, I like my good old-fashioned fantasy that involves a sort of escapism, but I want a level of realism to it, so that you can connect. I don't want it to be sugar-coated all the time. I don't mind I like sugar-coated stuff too, but I don't want it to be sugar-coated all the time. I want to every so often, I want to read books that aren't sugar-coated, that aren't always happy endings and fluffiness and all candy and lollipops and everything works out and everyone saves the day. I mean, that's why I've tried to get into some of the, I can never get into those shows that you watch as a kid because because they're meant for kids. Because I'm an adult and my tastes have changed and I don't want the fluffy stuff anymore. I don't want the kiddie stuff that will, protect me and stuff like that and will shelter me from all the horrors of the adult world. I know some older people who still like My Little Pony because it's fun and fluffy and happy and everything always works out. And yes, there's the complexities and I've heard, I don't know if I'm watching it, I probably will never, and I will never watch it, but, they say that I've heard from people that, it still has things that adults can enjoy. And yes, there are, kids things that look on the surface that they're meant for kids that can be meant for adults too, like movies like Shrek, for instance, or people that grew up with Disney still enjoy and will watch Disney movies. But at the same time, it's still like a kid thing where in the end everything's gonna work out and yes, there are adult stuff where it's predictable and everything's gonna work out. But at the same time, it's also much more mature, and it doesn't sugarcoat things like kids shows do now. Of course, you could argue that I don't watch that kind of stuff or read that kind of stuff all the time. Although I've been reading middle grade lately, so yeah, maybe I don't know, but I mean, come on, it's meant for kids, so they're not gonna make it look like they want to protect kids. They want to shelter them. So in kids' stories, it always works out. In my experience, it works out all the time, and everything's happy, and everyone learns a lesson. And the bad guy in the end, and bad guys, you try to change them, and they will change. They will grow as a person. But in the real world, in the adult world, it doesn't work like that. And so King, he does not sugarcoat things. He does not write for kids. And, I mean, he only wrote one book for kids, and that was for his daughter. And that's great. I'm glad he did that for his daughter. That was really sweet. And, from what I heard about it, I have no interest in reading it because it's very, the plot is, very predictable and sugarcoated and everything works out perfectly. But he was writing for his daughter at the time, so of course he had that in mind. That was for kids. Yeah, it had some things that were scary, and I do know that particular story introduces one of his reoccurring villains. Actually, I think it's his only reoccurring villain, and that villain is the main antagonist, actually, in this book, I believe, and in the Dark Tower series, and that's the Man in Black, aka Randall Flagg. But other than that, it still was very much very, that was the one book that I know of anyway that is like, you can tell it's written for kids. But other than that, he doesn't write kids' work, and he doesn't sugarcoat even for the adults, the adult reader. I mean, for his main audience, because sometimes the main, like, if you're reading for like YA books, YA novels will sugarcoat things. But a lot of those who read YA are adults, are gonna be on the verge of adulthood. So I feel like you shouldn't always sugarcoat it in YA novels. I feel sometimes some YA authors play it safe, and King never does. He never plays it safe. So it's not just about sugarcoating things, it's about playing, it's also about, like, he doesn't play it safe. And I love that. I love that he doesn't play it. I love that I don't know who's gonna survive in whatever's going on. If, like, I mean, when I'm reading it, I'm, like, hoping that the hero survives, or the heroine, but I don't know, and I like that. I like the feeling of not knowing, the nervousness I get, and being like, oh, I hope they survive, and then realizing, oh, they're not going to survive. Like, I was reading The Library Policeman, and I didn't know what was going to happen to our main character, whose name I do not remember. I was worried, oh no, he wasn't going to survive, so whatever, our antagonist was going to win, and, it looked like it in both cases, but it did. No, that one did end on a happy note, and that's the thing. He does end some of his books do end on a happy note, or at least a bittersweet note. And sometimes I think it should. I don't, every so often have a happy ending, have a, a sugary sweet ending. Although I wouldn't say his endings are sugary sweet, and sometimes they're plain bad, like, because it's one of the major criticisms he always receives, that his endings are bad. The other one being that he's crass, and his, people are, which I am curious if, because one of the stories he shared on writing was his teacher, either she was his teacher or a counselor at his high school. He, like, got in trouble because he was selling a short story that he wrote, which ironically, well, I don't know if it would be ironic or not. Sometimes I say something's ironic, but then it's like, am I using the definition correctly? But, he wrote, like, it was his version of The Pit and the Pendulum, which was originally, I think, it was a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, which, of course, when he was growing up, I guess it became one of those black and white horror movies. Just one of, and he wrote his own novel version of it that he sold in school. But of course, you can't do that. You can't solicit your things at school. And he got in trouble and got called to the office. And his either, like I said, teacher / counselor, I don't remember what she was, but she had said, "Why do you write this junk?" She referred to it as junk. And in fact, later on, they were like, "We want you to be the sports writer for our newspaper," thinking, oh, if he becomes a sports writer for the school newspaper, he'll stop writing the junk that he likes to write. And lo and behold, he's making millions of dollars. Well, maybe not. I think J.K. Rowling makes more money than him, but he's making a lot of money for writing that junk he loves to write. So I wonder if he ever, maybe, if his teacher / counselor ever saw that, or, like, if he ever sent it to that person. I just, it's like, he's still he's very popular still, and he's writing what you dub as junk. So I just thought that was kind of interesting listening to it. Of course, that doesn't really apply to what this video is about, which is why I love him as an author. And the other obvious thing is the junk that he writes. Like, he doesn't just write horror stories. I mean, we all know he doesn't. Yes, he mainly has the label of horror author, and he writes a lot of horror, but there's always, like, the Dark Tower series is a fantasy with some horror elements in it, I think. It's been a while since I read the first 3 books, and I decided to start over because it had been a long time since I read the 4th book, like years, so I figured I need to start over, which I haven't officially done it yet, but I did take the bookmark out of the 4th book so I could start reading the first book. And I attempted to, but then I got distracted by other books. But he like The Eyes of the Dragon, the story he wrote for his daughter, is fantasy. And The Stand is post-apocalyptic slash post-apocalyptic story. And sometimes his stories are more contemporary, like, or The Green Mile is not a horror story. And The Body is about a group of friends, and they discover a dead body. I haven't seen the movie or read the book, but I know a little bit about it because you're bound to know. If you like Stephen King to any capacity, or if you're interested in him in his work in any capacity, then you're gonna learn bits. You might learn at least the bits and pieces about his work because he's so universally popular. And so not all his books are fantasy, but when he does write, but horror is what he writes best. And when he writes his horror novels, which is most of his work, it's not just about, a bunch of teenagers being chased by a monster, or there's, it's also, they're always metaphors. They always go beyond just some monsters after you, or some, something evil is trying to harm you or take over or something. It's always a deeper message, which I think in the root of horror, that's what it is. Like, there's always even those slasher movies. Like, I was watching an episode of Ghost Whisperer where she was dealing with a girl that was being haunted by her friend, and they both made horror films. And before he died, they were working on this project to find out what scares people and why they love the horror films that they love, and how it might be interpreted as whatever scares them the most, their deepest fears. So horror to me is not just about scaring the crap out of you and making you jump and all that. It's also has some deeper message. It's a psychological, in fact. And like for instance, it's not just about some crazy, creepy clown that's really an alien that is trying to drain you of your fear, killing you by draining you of your fear, and then eating you, mostly children. It's about the loss of innocence. At least that's how I interpret it. It's about this friendship and how strong it is, and how, and how this town is full, and how it feeds off the hate, the racism, and the prejudice. And all the characters that say that foul language, that stuff that comes off as hateful are racist or prejudiced. It's either because the characters aren't meant to don't know any better in the story, or they're villainous people, they're hateful people, they're people that you want to see dead. And so, like, Henry Bowers is a racist, foul-mouthed redneck. He's, horrible, so you hate his guts. You don't care what happens to him. So, there's also, like, what are some of his other, Misery is about, the message of the plight that people that, the screenwriters and authors who are, sometimes they feel like they're slaves to their fans. And they're trying to please, but they want to write for themselves, and not everybody's gonna love what they want to write. And how how, like, fans, how crazy they can get. I mean, not all of us, hopefully there are very few people like Annie Wilkes, but, it looks at us fans and how far lengths we will go to, like, get what we want from the author. And sometimes it's a little a little too demanding. Now, like I said, not all of us are like Annie Wilkes, of course. And then, like, Misery is about, grief and how we all handle grief differently and the struggle of it. And is it right to bring people back just because we didn't expect them to die? I mean, there's always some deeper message in his works. He's looking at examining. It's a fun way to do it. That's why I like some of those movies that look at certain issues of our society, but doing it in a fun, creative way. Like Pleasantville, that's like that. That's a commentary on society. Basically, that's why, like, I love satires. And of course, I think Canterbury Tales is a satire altogether. And I think if I understood that one better, then maybe I would like it. I would have enjoyed it more. And that, all of his books are like commentary. A lot of times his novels are commentaries on society. He doesn't set out to do that. But that's how a lot of times they come off in that way. They come off as looking at something deeper meaning, something that he cares about, something he's passionate about, and that he thinks is important. Like I said, but without meaning to. He also just writes, he will come up with a situation. Which, it's funny, I wonder, which, it's kind of interesting, people constantly saying he's a bad ending, and while listening to the audiobook of On Writing, he said he doesn't think about the ending. He doesn't want to come up with the ending, because it's like, why do you want to know the end? It's about the journey. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey to the end. Which, I'm guessing he doesn't care that people don't, like, he humors them is like, I mean, the fact that in the latest movie adaptation of It, the chapter 2, the sequel, there's a scene where the character Bill Denbrough shows up at a little shop because he spots his bike from his childhood in that shop. And this is one of the times where King makes an appearance as he comes up with this character, the shop owner, and he's like, he approached, he's talking to Bill, and Bill's like, do you want me to sign your book or something, or what did you think of my latest book? And he's like, I don't like the ending. So he's aware, of course, that people do not like his ending, which is funny. It is very funny that he kind of makes fun of it, so it's like, he probably doesn't care that people don't like his ending. Because, like I said, all he cares about is the journey, and I think that is important. Like, you prioritize, because most of the book is the journey, it's, the ending is just the final destination. I think the journey is more important. I mean, you want to have a good enough ending, but it doesn't have to be perfect. But I also think it's important to not make it clean cut in like a fancy tied up a nice bow, which he does not. I mean, like, I don't think that's why people don't like his endings. I mean, maybe some of them, yeah, I haven't personally asked anyone why they don't like his endings, why he thinks they're bad endings. So I don't know for sure but to me, his endings are not tied up in a nice fancy bow usually. So even if his endings are bad, at least they're not neat and tidy and perfect. They're messy, but then again, maybe I'm wrong here. I haven't personally asked anybody. But this is why I probably should have taken notes. I was doing so good. But that's, I think, because he doesn't know the ending. First of all, that's why most of his novels are probably so long. But it's also, like, I think in a way that benefits him, not having been planned out. Because I know that people don't always like meandering stories, but sometimes I think it's more interesting. It makes it more tense and nerve-wracking. It's like, what's going to happen next? And, oh my god, I think as long as you have good writing and if you meander, as long as you don't drag it out too much, and make it good and interesting, making these and wipe out, dismiss all the boring stuff, I think you can still make a good Mandarin story. I mean, the Wise Man, people still love the Wise Man's Fear, the sequel to The Name of the Wind. And I'm told one of the criticisms it did receive from another booktuber is that it does meander. But that, it's not that way for everyone. Some people actually like the meandering. And in his case, I kind of like it. I like his meandering. And plus, he doesn't, again, back to the writing style. The writing is not boring. It's not tedious. I mean, when I do start reading his works again, the writing, just pulls me in. And I feel like I recognize those characters. I see those people. Even more so now in the type. I live kind of in a small town community. Even so now. Waldorf wasn't, Waldorf was not like that, but where I live now is like that. And of course, I also watch movies about that kind of stuff all the time. Which is another thing I love is that the way he writes about small towns, the quirkiness of small towns, and how the dirtiness of small towns, all the skeletons in the closet of small towns. It's always very interesting and engaging. It makes you you're wondering, you can't help but be curious and want to understand, and you're amused by these small towns. And it also makes things a little bit scarier, because you almost feel like you're in a bubble. Salem's Lot was where Dracula came to suburbia, and they were in the small town where rumors spread quickly and things were, they were in this bubble and no one was safe. And I think if I remember correctly, by the end of it, Ben Mears, our main character, was the last man standing. Which, spoiler alert. And, he does such a good job. He also, he's also really, like I said, going back to his writing style and how all the details that he puts in about his characters, all their thoughts and feelings, and the things that their bathroom habits. I feel it's why he's so good at character work. I am a plot-driven reader, but I love his characters. They're always so real and so interesting, and it's, now there's some of them that there's a few every so often that I just don't care about. But that's so very few. Most of them, I am interested in them and want to know. And even if I can't 100% relate to them, I couldn't relate to, one of his characters in this novel is someone who had a one-hit wonder, but now he's not doing that. He wasn't doing that great before what happened in this book happens. And no, I can't relate to that. I can't relate to, being successful and becoming rich temporarily and then losing it. And I can't relate to being addicted to drugs or being in prison or anything. Thankfully, I can't relate to any of those. But they still feel like you can still kind of understand and sympathize with them, and you get them, you understand them, and that's what King does. He's so good at characters, and even if you can't relate, you still, you can kind of sympathize, or you at least get them and understand them, even if they're not sympathetic in your eyes because they're just such bad people. You get it. You get why they are the way they are, and you are interested in them to an extent, or at least I am. And there's also the good guys, too. The good guys, even when they do bad things, you kind of understand, and you gotta wonder, and you ask yourself, would I do that thing? Even if as good of a person as I try to be, maybe I would do that thing too, considering the situation. So it's just, his work is just so interesting and engaging. It's very long, but it's still so interesting. And, it does, and it's just, he's such a great writer. Now, if you're new to King and this makes you kind of interested in his work, I would start with some of his, like, either start with, like, his novellas or his shorter novels, like Pet Sematary or Misery or something. Or, like I said, his novellas or short stories, just to get you started. Like, I read Everything's Eventual, that was pretty good. Not great, but I've been reading his work for a little while at that point. And, 4 Past Midnight has some great ones. That one has the Secret Garden, Secret Window, which is what the movie starring Johnny Depp is based off of. And then it has The Longlers, which it does have an adaptation. And that one actually, in one of the Secret Garden interpretations, there is one of the actor who plays Mary Lennox is in The Longlers. And then it also has The Library Policeman, which is very creepy and weird, and I feel like there is a connection between her and Pennywise, but I could be wrong there. It's just they are very similar. Not the same kind of, like, thing, but similar. And it also has the Sundog, which is interesting too. And that has the whole formula of the creepy, the sinister camera that is like has some creepy creature in the photographs every time you take a picture kind of story. That was not as scary, but it is a little, to me at least, it's creepy. In all of his work, there's a reason all of his work has turned into on-screen adaptations, where it's like a mini-series or a movie. It's because it's good writing and the story is exciting, and everyone loves good horror thriller stories. And one of the last things, even though I'm not interested in everything he writes, he does write a lot of different things. He doesn't just write straight up horror. He writes, he's the Dark Tower series, which is fantasy / sci-fi in a way, because I feel like that's one of those books that kind of, as much as I hate to say it, does blur the line between fantasy and sci-fi. He wrote The Eyes of the Dragon, straight up fantasy, and it's more YA. And, The Dark Half, it has a which is another thing, all of his, if you're not into this, all of his works, most of the time, they have a supernatural. Like, a lot of his works, not all of them, I don't think. I mean, I'm still working my way through his library, but not all of them have, but a lot of them have always, and a lot of them end up having a supernatural twist. Like, The Dark Half, that has one, and that's kind of a thriller. And then Misery doesn't have a supernatural or fantasy twist. And that's one of the few that doesn't actually. It's basically like a fan kidnaps her favorite writer who has decided to stop writing her favorite fantasy series. It kills off the main character and she gets mad. And sound familiar? And then, so that's one of the few that doesn't. So that one's, there's no monster. And what makes that one so scary is because the monster is a human that we can relate to, especially if you're a fan of something, of like a show or a movie or a musical artist, or, an artist, like a painter or a sketcher or something. We all can kind of relate to Annie on some level, that now we're not all as crazy or have issues upstairs as Annie does, but we all kind of can relate to her passionate feelings and her anger at the author for killing off the character, and we think that does end sometimes, whether we're right or not. Sometimes we think that doesn't make any sense, or that ending was bad, or that ending is bad. Fans can get crazy and upset and emotional, get. And so, like I said, though, we're not all as bad as Annie, but we can get there. And then there's, like I said, The Body. Yes, there's a little bit of a horror element like where they find a dead body, but there's no supernatural element as far as I know. Now I haven't read it yet, so I could be wrong, but I don't think there's any supernatural. Oh, I see it. There's no supernatural element. Or, and I have not read Full Dark No Stars yet. I've been meaning to, and I think 1922. I don't think it doesn't sound like there's a supernatural element. And except for I don't think Gerald's Game has a supernatural element. I think some of these might not, the ones in this one. And not all, in Everything's Eventual, I don't think all of them have supernatural elements, I don't think. Well, maybe they do. Well, no, because there are some that are about couples, and, like, there's at least two stories about two couples that are kind of, like, divorced and are at war with each other and fighting and stuff like that. So, like I said, not all of them are supernatural if that's not your thing. And he also writes, like I said, The Green Mile. That one does have supernatural element, but it's not horror, and it's not like about. It's more realistic. It's about this guy, a black gentleman who is a black guy who is framed for the murder of this guy's daughters. And I don't remember if he did it or not. I don't think he did it. And he's going to go to the electric chair. They don't care. They don't believe that he didn't do it. I don't think he did it. He didn't do it. And there's this whole, because he has this supernatural healing power. And I imagine it's one of these things where, like, they find him near the body of the little girl, I don't know, and it looks like he did it. Now, I haven't read it, so I don't know. I'm not familiar with it. I've seen bits and pieces of the movie, but that's about it. Let's see what else. He has so many works, and he has a few nonfiction, like he has On Writing a Memoir on the Craft. He has Danse Macabre, which is about the horror genre. And I think there's one more nonfiction that he has. And it was like, and I guess it was like after he wrote On Writing, he's like, oh, I feel comfortable. I can do this, I can write non. And by the way, his memoir, even if you're not a fan, I feel like his memoir is very informative on writing itself, on the business of writing, and how it all works, and how the process of it, and what you should and shouldn't do. He's not condescending or arrogant about it. He just gives his advice and his thoughts on the writing process, and how, if you want to become an author, what you should do, and how how he thinks you might want to consider doing it, and how he does it, and the experiences that influence his writing. So even if you're not a fan of Stephen King, he's still an author like any other author. So what he talks about in the book is probably similar to what authors would talk about if they wrote their own book on writing. So there's so many good things about his writing that even if I don't love everything he writes, even if I'm not interested in every plot he writes, when I'm interested in most of his work, and like I said in the beginning of this video, never say never. I might actually one day be interested in reading the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, or Christine, or From Buick 8, or Gerald's Game, or the girl who loved Tom Gordon. Like, all those, I might potentially be interested in them. You never know. Because he's such a good writer. He pulls you in with his work, and he just gives you a good, engaging, real story. Even if it has supernatural aspects of it, you still connect with the characters. So that's really all I want to say. There's like, I bet there are people who probably say why Stephen King is great. Like Daniel Green has his own video on why you should read Stephen King, and I will link it down below if you're interested. That, is so much better and so succinct and more organized. Probably better than my little chat, and less stumbling and less pauses. In fact, no pauses at all, probably. So I really hope you guys check out Stephen King. I think you might, if or at least to read his book on writing. I think that would be very interesting to read, because even if you're not a fan, you might still be interested, because he's still an author like any other author. He just happens to write you might not like everything he writes. I think it's still very informative. I mean, he does talk about all the technical aspects and all the business side of it. I feel like I have a hair on my arm. So if you guys like this video, be sure to give a thumbs up, click subscribe if you haven't already, click the bell notification below if you are interested to know when I post videos. And I hope you're enjoying your reading, and I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye!